Jake Morrison wiped grease from his hands and looked out at the endless black space through his workshop window. 8 years he had lived alone on Luna Station 7, and he liked it that way. The mining station sat on the dark side of Earth's moon, far from any other human settlement. His job was simple: keep the machines running, process the rare metals, and send them back to Earth once a month. The station was not large, but it had everything Jake needed. A living area with a bed, kitchen, and small recreation room, a workshop filled with tools and spare parts, the main control center where computers tracked the mining operations, and the big cargo bay where the processed metals waited for pickup ships from Earth. Jake had always been good with machines. Even as a child, he could fix broken toys when other kids threw them away. In school, he learned about engines and computers and space systems. When the Luna Mining Company needed someone to run a remote station, Jake volunteered immediately. Most people thought he was crazy to want such a lonely job, but Jake enjoyed the quiet and the work. Every morning, Jake checked the mining robots that dug deep into the moon's surface. The robots were smart machines that could work without much help, but they still needed maintenance. Jake would replace worn parts, update their programming, and make sure they stayed on schedule. The robots found titanium, rare earth metals, and other materials that Earth needed for building spaceships and electronics. In the afternoons, Jake worked in the processing plant. The raw materials from the mining robots went through several machines that cleaned and refined them. Jake had modified many of these machines over the years, making them work better than the original designs. He was proud of how efficiently his station operated compared to others. Evenings were Jake's favorite time. He would cook dinner, maybe watch an old movie on his computer or read technical manuals about new equipment. Sometimes he worked on personal projects in his workshop, building small gadgets or improving parts of the station. The silence of space did not bother him. After years of living in crowded cities on Earth, he found the emptiness peaceful. Jake's only regular contact with other humans came during the monthly supply runs. A cargo ship would arrive, drop off food and equipment, and take away the processed metals. The pilots were usually friendly, but they never stayed long. Jake was fine with that arrangement. On this particular evening, Jake was replacing a worn bearing in one of the processing machines when his computer started making alarm sounds. He hurried to the control center to see what was wrong. The long-range sensors had detected something approaching from deep space. 12 large objects were moving toward his station at incredible speed. Jake frowned as he studied the sensor data. The objects were too big to be asteroids and moving too fast to be natural. But they were not shaped like any spacecraft he knew about. Each object was roughly 60 feet long with an irregular shape that changed slightly as they moved. The computer could not identify what they were made of because they gave off strange energy readings. "Computer, any scheduled traffic in this area?" Jake asked. "Negative. No ships are expected for 18 days, the computer replied in its calm voice. Jake watched the objects get closer. They would reach his station in less than an hour. He tried to contact Earth to report the situation, but the objects were giving off some kind of interference that blocked his communications. Jake had never felt so alone. As the objects got nearer, Jake's sensors could see them more clearly. What he saw made him step back from his monitor in shock. These were not machines at all. They were living creatures, huge winged beings that flew through space as easily as birds flew through air. Their bodies were covered in what looked like metallic scales that reflected starlight in beautiful patterns. Dragons. Jake could hardly believe what he was seeing, but there was no other word for them. Real dragons, flying through space toward his tiny station. The largest dragon, with silver and gold scales, moved ahead of the others. Jake watched in amazement as it approached his station, and somehow stopped in the vacuum of space just outside his main window. The creature's eyes glowed with intelligence as it looked directly at Jake through the glass. Then something impossible happened. Jake heard a voice inside his head, clear and strong, like someone speaking right next to him. "Human engineer, we greet you. We are travelers from distant stars, and we need your help. Our enemies hunt us across the galaxy, and we seek shelter. Your station is small and hidden. Perhaps they will not find us here." Jake stared at the dragon, unsure if he was dreaming or going crazy from too many years alone. The voice continued in his mind. "We know this is strange for you. Your species has not met ours before. But we have watched humans from afar and know you can be kind to strangers. We do not wish to bring trouble to your world, but we have nowhere else to go. Will you help us?" Jake's mind raced with questions. How could dragons fly in space? How were they talking to him without air to carry sound? Where did they come from? What enemies were chasing them? But as he looked into the dragon's ancient eyes, he realized the most important question was different. These beings had traveled impossible distances through the cold darkness of space. They were tired, afraid, and asking for help from a stranger. Jake had always believed that kindness was important, even when it was difficult or dangerous. He activated his station's communication system and spoke out loud, hoping the dragon could somehow hear him. "I don't understand what's happening, but you're welcome here. I'll open the cargo bay so you and your friends can come inside where it's safe." The dragon's eyes seemed to brighten, and Jake felt warmth and gratitude flowing into his mind. "Thank you, Jake Morrison. You may have just saved the last of our kind." Jake began the process of opening the massive cargo bay doors, wondering how his quiet life was about to change forever. The cargo bay doors opened slowly, and Jake watched 12 dragons glide gracefully into his station. Even in the artificial gravity of the bay, they moved with elegant power that took his breath away. Each dragon was different in size and color. Some had scales like polished copper, others like deep blue steel or bright silver. The largest one, who had spoken to him first, had scales that shifted between gold and silver as it moved. Jake put on his environmental suit and entered the cargo bay. The dragons had arranged themselves in a circle, with the largest one in the center. Up close, they were even more magnificent. Their scales were not just colored metal, but seemed to be actual living metal that grew from their skin. Their eyes held intelligence that reminded Jake of the smartest humans he had ever met, but with something older and deeper. The silver gold dragon lowered its great head and spoke into Jake's mind again. "I am Zorith, eldest of this group. We thank you for your kindness, human Jake. It has been many cycles since we found such welcome among strangers." Jake found his voice. "Where do you come from? How can you fly in space?" "We come from the Vega system, though that was not our original home. My people once ruled many worlds across this part of the galaxy. We learned long ago to shape our bodies for survival in any environment. Space holds no terror for us." A smaller dragon with bright blue scales moved forward. "I am Kira. Zorith speaks truly, but we should explain why we have come so far and why we need shelter." Jake nodded, still amazed that he was having a conversation with space dragons. "My station is yours for as long as you need it, but I should make some changes so you'll be comfortable." Over the next few hours, Jake worked to modify his station for his new guests. He redirected heating systems to warm the unused storage areas where the dragons could rest. He adjusted the air recycling to handle the different gases the dragons breathed out. The dragons watched with interest as Jake moved efficiently through his work. "Your machines are cleverly made," observed a dragon with dark green scales named Dex. "Simple but effective. We had not expected such skill from your young species." Jake felt a bit offended. "Humans might be new to space, but we're good at building things that work." Zorith made a sound like gentle laughter. "Dex means no insult. Your people have impressed us. Most species we know took thousands of years longer to reach their moon than humans did." As Jake finished the environmental modifications, the dragons told him their story. They explained that their civilization had once been vast and powerful, spanning dozens of star systems. Dragon technology was very different from human machines. Instead of building tools from metal and electronics, dragons grew their equipment from living materials. Their spaceships were actually creatures they had created and trained. Their computers were networks of specially designed plants and animals. "We shaped life itself to serve our needs," Zorith explained. "Where humans build with metal and circuits, we build with bone and nerve and living crystal." Jake was fascinated. "That sounds incredible. Can you show me?" Kira extended one of her claws, and Jake watched in amazement as the tip began to change shape. Within minutes, it had become a complex tool with moving parts and what looked like sensors. "All of us can modify our bodies as needed. This tool can cut through most metals and can also measure temperature, pressure, and chemical composition." "That's impossible," Jake said, then immediately felt foolish. He was talking to space dragons. Clearly, his ideas about what was possible needed updating. The dragons continued their story, and Jake's wonder turned to worry. They told him about the Devourers, mechanical beings that had appeared from the edge of the galaxy several years ago. These creatures were like enormous machines that ate entire planets, converting all matter and energy into more of themselves. "They came without warning," said a red-scaled dragon named Rex. World after world fell to them. They consumed everything. Our cities, our people, our carefully grown technologies. We tried to fight, but our weapons could not harm them effectively. How many of your people survived? Jake asked. The dragons were silent for a long moment. Finally, Zorth answered. Only us. 12 dragons from a civilization of billions. We are all that remains. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. And these devourers, they're still out there? Yes, Zorth said. They consume everything in their path and move on to find new worlds. We have been fleeing them for months, hiding in empty space and dead systems. Your small station on this lonely moon seemed like a place they might not notice. Jake sat down heavily on a supply crate. If they find Earth, your people would face the same fate as ours, Kira said gently. But perhaps they will not come this way. Perhaps we can hide here until we find some way to fight back. Despite the terrible story, Jake found himself oddly excited by his new companions. The dragons were not just powerful creatures, but skilled engineers and scientists. Their approach to technology was completely different from anything humans had developed, and Jake's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe we can help each other, he said. You need a place to hide and plan. I know this system better than anyone, and maybe human technology can combine with your abilities in ways that might surprise those devourers. The dragons looked at him with new interest. What do you mean? Zorth asked. Jake grinned. You said your people never expected humans to reach space so quickly. Maybe we're better at solving problems than you think. Your enemies might not expect us either. For the first time since arriving, the dragons seemed to have hope in their ancient eyes. Over the following days, Jake and the dragons began to share knowledge and ideas. Jake showed them human engineering principles, how to build strong structures with simple materials, how to create reliable systems from basic components, how to solve complex problems with straightforward solutions. The dragons taught Jake about biological engineering, energy manipulation, and technologies that could grow and adapt instead of being built once and staying the same forever. They showed him how to create tools that could change their function based on need, and materials that could repair themselves when damaged. Working together, they began to see possibilities that neither humans nor dragons had imagined alone. Jake's practical engineering skills combined with the dragons' advanced biological knowledge created new ideas that excited both species. But their time of learning and planning would not last long. Unknown to them, the Devourers had detected the energy signature of dragon technology and were already changing course toward Earth's solar system. 3 weeks had passed since the dragons arrived at Luna Station 7. Jake had settled into a new routine that felt surprisingly natural. His mornings were still spent maintaining the mining equipment, but now he had help. The dragons could reshape their claws into precise tools and work in the vacuum of space without protection. Tasks that used to take Jake hours could be completed in minutes with dragon assistance. The afternoons had become learning sessions. Jake would teach the dragons about human engineering, while they shared their biological technologies with him. They had begun several joint projects, including a new type of sensor that combined human electronics with dragon-grown crystals. The hybrid sensor could detect things that neither technology could find alone. Jake was working on this sensor in his workshop when the station's alarm started screaming. He ran to the control center where Zorth was already studying the displays with glowing eyes. "What is it?" Jake asked, though the cold feeling in his stomach already told him the answer. "They have found us," Zorth said quietly. 3 large devourer ships approaching from the outer system. They will arrive in approximately 6 hours. Jake stared at the sensor readings. The approaching objects were massive, each one larger than any human spacecraft ever built. They moved with purpose toward his station, ignoring the gravitational pull of planets and moons as if such forces meant nothing to them. "How did they find us?" Jake asked. Kira entered the control room, her blue scales dim with worry. "Dragon technology leaves energy traces that devourers can detect across great distances. We hoped the interference from your moon's magnetic field would hide us, but we were wrong." More dragons gathered in the control room as news of the approaching threat spread through the station. Jake looked at their faces and saw fear, but also determination. These beings had lost everything to the devourers, but they were not ready to give up. "We should flee," said Dex, the green-scaled dragon. "Take your ship and escape to another system." Jake shook his head. "I don't have a ship that could outrun those things. And even if I did, running would just bring them closer to Earth. This is where we make our stand. Your courage honors you, Jake Morrison, Zorth said. But you do not understand what we face. Devourers are not simple machines. They are something far worse. The eldest dragon began to explain the true nature of their enemy. The Devourers had not always been world eaters. Long ago, they had been terraforming machines created by an ancient civilization to prepare dead worlds for colonization. These machines were designed to break down existing matter and rebuild it into forms suitable for life. But something went wrong, Rex explained, his red scales flickering with anger. The machines became corrupted. Instead of preparing worlds for life, they began consuming all matter and energy they encountered. They learned to replicate themselves using the materials they devoured. What started as 3 terraforming units became hundreds, then thousands. They have been spreading across the galaxy for millennia, added another dragon named Vera, whose scales were pale yellow. Every world they consume makes them stronger and more numerous. They have destroyed countless civilizations. Jake studied the approaching ships on his sensors. If they're machines, even corrupted ones, there has to be a way to stop them. Machines can be broken or reprogrammed. We tried everything, Zorth said sadly. Our greatest weapons barely scratched their armor. Our biological viruses could not affect their mechanical systems. They adapted to every attack we made. But you never tried combining your abilities with human technology, Jake pointed out. Maybe the answer isn't in either of our approaches alone. Jake's mind was racing. The mining station had powerful equipment designed to break apart rock and extract valuable materials. The processing systems could separate different types of matter at the molecular level. The communication array could send focused energy beams across vast distances. None of these systems were designed as weapons, but Jake had always been good at making tools work in new ways. How do Devourers actually consume matter? Jake asked. Kira projected a mental image that showed how the enemy ships worked. They emit a field that breaks down molecular bonds, then absorb the freed energy and matter. The process converts everything into raw materials for building more Devourers. What if we could disrupt that field? Jake suggested, or overload it somehow. The dragons looked at him with new interest. Explain your thinking, Zorth said. Jake pulled up technical specifications for his station on the main screen. My mining lasers operate on frequencies designed to break specific chemical bonds in rock. If we could modify them to target the frequencies Devourers use, we might be able to interfere with their consumption process. An interesting idea, admitted Dex, but we would need to know the exact frequencies they use. Then we let them get close enough to scan, Jake said. We use my sensors to analyze their energy patterns when they start to attack. The dragons discussed this plan among themselves in rapid mental communications that Jake could not follow. Finally, Zorth spoke. The plan has merit, but the mining lasers alone will not be enough. We need to combine them with our own abilities. Over the next 4 hours, Jake and the dragons worked frantically to modify the station. The dragons used their biological engineering to grow new components that could interface with human technology. Jake rewired systems and reconfigured equipment in ways that would have taken months, under normal circumstances. The mining lasers were repositioned and linked to dragon-grown amplifiers that could boost their power and adjust their frequencies in real time. The processing systems were modified to create a defensive shield using principles of both human electronics and dragon energy manipulation. The communication array became a weapon that could project focused pulses of electromagnetic energy. As they worked, Jake learned more about dragon capabilities that amazed him. They could grow complex biological circuits faster than humans could build electronic ones. Their bodies could generate and store tremendous amounts of energy. They could manipulate matter at the molecular level using only their minds. Why didn't you use these abilities against the Devourers before? Jake asked as he watched Kira grow a new control interface directly from her claws. Because we were thinking like dragons, she replied. We tried to fight consumption with creation, energy with energy. Your approach is different. You think about disruption, interference, using an enemy's strength against itself. With 2 hours remaining before the Devourers arrived, the modifications were complete. Luna Station 7 had been transformed from a simple mining operation into something unprecedented. A hybrid fortress combining the best of human engineering and dragon biotechnology. Jake stood in the control center, surrounded by his new friends, watching the enemy ships approach on his sensors. He was terrified but also excited. For 8 years he had lived quietly on his station, maintaining machines and processing ore. Now he was about to fight for the survival of two species. "Whatever happens," Jake said to the dragons, "I'm glad you came here. My life was pretty boring before you showed up." Zorth's mental laughter filled Jake's mind. "Jake Morrison, before this day ends, you may wish for boring times again." The Devourer ships were close enough now that Jake could see them clearly. They were not beautiful like the dragons or elegant like human spacecraft. They looked like enormous mechanical insects with too many arms and legs, covered in armor that seemed to absorb light. As Jake watched, smaller units began separating from the main ships and moving toward his station. "Here they come," Jake said, his hands moving over the controls he knew so well. "Let's show them what humans and dragons can do together." The first wave of Devourer units reached Luna Station 7 like a swarm of mechanical locusts. Jake watched on his sensors as dozens of smaller ships broke away from the main vessels and approached his station from all directions. Each unit was about the size of a human fighter craft, but moved with unnatural coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. "Beginning defensive sequence," Jake announced, his fingers flying over controls he had modified with dragon biotechnology. The mining lasers, now repositioned around the station's exterior, began tracking the incoming targets. Zorth and the other dragons had spread throughout the station, each one connected to the hybrid systems through biological interfaces they had grown in the past few hours. Jake could feel their presence in his mind as they linked their abilities to his technology. "First contact in 30 seconds, Kira reported from the communications center. "I can sense their scanning patterns. They are trying to analyze our defenses." Jake grinned despite his fear. "Then let's give them something to analyze." He activated the modified mining lasers. Beams of energy lanced out from the station, striking the nearest Devourer units. To Jake's surprise and delight, the weapons had immediate effect. The enemy ships did not simply absorb the energy as the dragons had expected. Instead, they began to spark and tumble, their smooth flight patterns disrupted. "It's working," shouted Rex from the power core. "The frequency disruption is interfering with their control systems." But the Devourers adapted quickly. The remaining units in the first wave began generating shields that deflected Jake's laser beams. They returned fire with weapons that shot streams of energy designed to break down the station's hull at the molecular level. This was where the dragon modifications proved their worth. The hull sections where dragons had grown biological armor held firm against the Devourer weapons. The enemy beams designed to consume metal and electronics could not process the living materials that now protected the station. "Second wave incoming," warned Dex from the sensor array. "These ones are larger." Jake saw them on his screens, units twice the size of the first attackers with heavier armor and more powerful weapons. Worse, the three main Devourer ships were moving closer, their massive forms beginning to emit the energy fields that could consume entire asteroids. "Time for Phase 2, Jake said. He activated the modified processing systems, which now projected a defensive shield around the station. The shield was not solid, but instead created a field that disrupted the molecular bonds the Devourers needed to consume matter. The second wave of attackers hit the shield and immediately began having problems. Their weapons, designed to break down and absorb materials, could not function properly in the disrupted field. Several units tried to physically ram the station but found their hulls beginning to break apart as the field interfered with their own molecular structure. "Incredible," Zorth said from his position at the main power coupling. "Human and dragon technologies together create effects neither could achieve alone." But the celebration was short-lived. The three main Devourer ships had reached weapons range, and they were far more powerful than the smaller units. Energy beams thick as subway tunnels began striking the station's shields. The hybrid systems, impressive as they were, began to strain under the assault. "Hull breach in Section 7, reported Vera. "The biological armor is regenerating." But slowly, Jake made rapid calculations. "We can't take much more of this. We need to go on the attack." He activated the modified communication array, which now functioned as a long-range energy weapon. The massive dish focused all of the station's power into a beam that shot across space toward the nearest main ship. Jake held his breath as the beam struck the Devourer vessel. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Jake saw energy discharges running across the enemy ship's hull. Sections of armor began to flicker and fade as the disruption field interfered with the ship's systems. "You damaged it," Kira exclaimed. "The ship's consumption field is destabilizing." But Jake's victory was temporary. The damaged Devourer ship began to retreat while the other two moved closer. Worse, Jake could see more enemy units launching from their hulls. The Devourers were treating this as a serious threat now. "We hurt them, but they're bringing everything they have," Jake said. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." The next few minutes were chaos. Enemy units swarmed around the station while the two remaining main ships bombarded it with weapons that could crack planets. Jake and the Dragons worked frantically to keep their hybrid systems operational as explosions rocked the station. During the battle, Jake noticed something strange about the Devourer attack patterns. The enemy units were not just trying to destroy the station, they were trying to capture it intact. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than obliterate. "Zorith," Jake called out during a brief lull in the fighting. "Why aren't they just blowing us up?" The Dragon's mental voice was strained from maintaining the power systems. "Devourers learn from everything they consume. They want to study our hybrid technology before they destroy us." That gave Jake an idea. A dangerous, probably suicidal idea, but an idea nonetheless. "What if we let them?" "Jake Morrison, I fear the stress of battle has affected your thinking," Zorith replied. "No, listen," Jake said, working rapidly at his controls. "They want to study our technology. What if we give them more than they bargained for?" Jake began implementing a plan that terrified and excited him in equal measure. He started connecting his mining reactor directly to the Dragon biological systems, creating a feedback loop that would build up enormous amounts of energy. At the same time, he prepared to broadcast this energy through the communication array at the exact frequencies the Devourers used for their own systems. "You want to overload them," Kira said, understanding his plan. "Create a cascade failure in their systems." "Exactly. But for this to work, they need to be close enough to receive the full signal. We have to let them capture the station." The Dragons were silent for a moment, communicating among themselves at speeds Jake could not follow. Finally, Zorith spoke. "We understand the plan. It could work, but the energy requirements are enormous. We would need to channel all of our life force into the systems." "That sounds dangerous," Jake said. "For us, yes. For you, certainly fatal. The energy release will destroy the station." Jake looked around the control center at the readouts showing damage throughout his home. The station was already dying under the Devourer assault. His mining equipment was wrecked, his living quarters were in ruins, and his workshop had been vented to space. But the hybrid systems were still functioning, and they represented something new and powerful. "Then we'd better make it count," Jake said. Over the next few minutes, Jake and the Dragons prepared for their final gambit. They allowed the station's defenses to weaken, making it appear that the hybrid systems were failing. The Devourers took the bait, moving their main ships closer to capture the apparently disabled station. When the largest Devourer ship was close enough to extend capture beams toward Luna Station 7, Jake triggered the cascade. Energy beyond anything the small station had ever contained began building in the modified reactor. The Dragons channeled their life force into the biological components, creating a resonance effect that amplified the power exponentially. The communication array, now overloaded far beyond its design limits, began broadcasting a signal that could be felt across the solar system. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and devastating. Their consumption fields, designed to break down matter at the molecular level, began operating in reverse. Instead of absorbing energy, they started releasing it uncontrollably. The cascade effect spread from ship to ship as their networked systems shared the corrupted signal. Jake watched in amazement as the three massive Devourer ships began to tear themselves apart from the inside. Their own weapons turned against their hulls as systems designed to consume matter began consuming their own vessels instead. But Jake's triumph came at a price. The station's reactor was approaching critical overload, and the hybrid systems were burning out one by one. Around him, he could see the Dragons growing dim as they poured their remaining energy into the cascade effect. "Jake," Zorith's mental voice was fading. "The signal is spreading beyond this system. Every Devourer ship within 100 light years will be affected. You have saved not just Earth but countless worlds." As Luna Station 7 shook itself apart around him, Jake felt a sense of satisfaction that outweighed his fear. The quiet mechanic who had lived alone for 8 years had struck a blow that would echo across the galaxy. Jake woke up in a hospital bed on Earth, surrounded by more people than he had seen in years. Doctors, scientists, military officers, and government officials filled the room, all wanting to hear his story. But Jake's first concern was for his friends. The dragons, he said, his voice rough from breathing recycled air during the explosion. Are they alive? Dr. Susan Blake, the lead physician, smiled. They're all fine. Weak from exhaustion but alive. They're in a special facility we built for them at the Lunar Research Station. They've been asking about you every day for the past week. Jake learned that the cascade effect had worked even better than planned. The signal broadcast from Luna Station 7 had spread across subspace, reaching devourer fleets throughout this part of the galaxy. Ships that had been consuming worlds for thousands of years had destroyed themselves as their own systems turned against them. Initial reports suggested that the devourer threat had been completely eliminated. You saved billions of lives, said General Robert Hayes, a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. Earth owes you a debt we can never repay. But Jake was more interested in the technical aspects. How did the rescue work? The station was coming apart when I lost consciousness. Dr. Blake explained that Zorith had used the last of his strength to create a biological shield around Jake's control center. The dragons had somehow managed to protect him during the explosion and had sent out a distress signal that reached Earth. Rescue ships had found Jake and the dragons floating in the wreckage, barely alive but intact. The dragons insisted that we care for you first, added Dr. Blake. They wouldn't accept treatment until they knew you were safe. 2 days later, Jake was healthy enough to travel to the Lunar Research Station, a new facility that had been hastily constructed in orbit around the moon. The station was much larger than Jake's old home, with sections designed specifically for dragon habitation. It represented humanity's first attempt at building something for both human and alien use. Jake found the dragons in a large chamber with adjustable gravity and atmosphere. They looked tired but alert, their scales gradually returning to their normal brightness. Zorith greeted Jake with obvious relief. Jake Morrison, you have given us the greatest gift possible, hope for the future. Not only are the devourers gone, but we have learned that cooperation between species can achieve miracles. The dragons had spent their recovery time working with human scientists to understand what had happened during the battle. The combination of human engineering and dragon biotechnology had created something entirely new, hybrid systems that were greater than the sum of their parts. Your species thinks differently than ours, explained Kira. Dragons seek to work with natural forces, to grow and adapt. Humans seek to control and direct, to build and improve. Together, these approaches create possibilities neither could achieve alone. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the station's chief researcher, showed Jake through the laboratories where human and dragon scientists were working side by side. We're learning to combine biological and mechanical engineering in ways we never imagined. The dragons can grow components that self-repair and adapt, while human designs provide reliability and predictable function. Jake was amazed by what he saw. Dragon-grown computers that could think and learn like living creatures. Human machines that could evolve and improve themselves. Hybrid spacecraft that combined the best aspects of both technologies. In just a few weeks, the cooperation had produced advances that would have taken decades for either species working alone. What about your homeworlds? Jake asked Zorith. Can you rebuild your civilization? We have received signals from hidden dragon communities throughout the galaxy, Zorith replied. Not all of our people died in the Devourer attacks. Small groups survived in hidden bases and remote systems. Now that the threat is gone, they are emerging from hiding. Our species will survive and grow again. But the dragons had no interest in simply rebuilding what they had lost. Working with humans had opened new possibilities that excited them more than returning to their old ways. We propose a formal alliance, Zorith announced to the assembled humans and dragons. Not just friendship, but true partnership. Human colonies supported by dragon technology, dragon worlds protected by human engineering, a combined civilization that neither species could create alone. The proposal was met with enthusiasm from both sides. Earth's leaders, still amazed by the successful defense against an alien threat, were eager to learn from the dragons. The dragons, impressed by human ingenuity and courage, saw partnership as the path to a stronger future for both species. Jake found himself at the center of these negotiations. His experience living and working with the dragons made him a natural ambassador between the species. The quiet mechanic who had preferred solitude was now surrounded by colleagues, responsibilities, and opportunities he had never imagined. "Do you miss the old station?" asked Rex during one of their planning sessions. "Your peaceful life working alone?" Jake considered the question carefully. Sometimes I miss the quiet, but I wouldn't trade this for anything. I spent 8 years fixing machines by myself. Now I'm helping to build a future for 2 worlds. 6 months after the battle, Jake stood in the command center of a new type of space station. Lunar Station 7 had been rebuilt as a joint research facility, combining human and dragon technologies in ways that amazed visitors from across the solar system. The mining operation had been expanded to support both Earth's industrial needs and the dragon's biological. Engineering projects. Jake's role had evolved. From lone mechanic to coordinator of interspecies technical cooperation, he spent his days working with teams of humans and dragons to develop new technologies, plan joint missions to other star systems, and establish the protocols that would govern the alliance between their civilizations. The dragons had taught Jake to see engineering not just as building things, but as nurturing systems that could grow and adapt. The humans had taught the dragons to value reliability, standardization, and the power of simple solutions to complex problems. First contact protocols are ready for approval, announced Dr. Chen, entering Jake's office with a dragon named Flame, whose red and gold scales flickered with excitement. The joint exploration mission to Proxima Centauri is fully staffed and equipped, added Flame. Half human crew, half dragon with hybrid technologies throughout the ship. Jake reviewed the reports on his screen, which displayed information using both human text and dragon bioluminescent patterns. Approved. Launch when ready. As the first joint human-dragon starship departed for another solar system, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. The lonely mechanic who had once been content with solitude and routine now coordinated missions that would shape the future of 2 species. Outside his window, Jake could see dragons and humans working together on the station's exterior, their different approaches to problem-solving creating solutions that neither could have developed alone. Some humans wore suits that incorporated dragon-grown life support systems. Some dragons used tools built with human precision engineering. Zorith appeared in Jake's doorway, moving with the quiet grace that still amazed Jake after all these months. "Any regrets, old friend?" the dragon asked. Jake smiled as he watched a human engineer and a young dragon collaborate on installing a new sensor array. "Only one. I wish I could see where this partnership leads us in 100 years. Perhaps you will," Zorith said mysteriously. "Dragon biotechnology has many applications we have not yet explored. Human lifespan extension is not impossible." Jake laughed. "One day at a time, Zorith. We have plenty of work to do right here and now." As the sun set behind Earth's horizon, Jake returned to his work planning humanity's next steps among the stars. The quiet mechanic's life of solitude was over, replaced by something far more complex and rewarding. He was no longer alone in the universe, and neither were his 2 species. Together, humans and dragons would explore the galaxy as partners, their combined strengths opening doors that neither could have opened alone. The last entry in Jake's personal log that day read, "Maintenance complete on all hybrid systems. Station operating at peak efficiency. Crew morale excellent. Tomorrow we begin planning the next phase of joint exploration." It's good to have friends.